Hello everyone, and welcome to our CWEA-CASA webinar, Overcoming Operation and Maintenance Challenges. I'm Wendy Wirt, President of the California Water Environment Association and a civil engineer here at the Los Angeles County Sanitation Districts. Today's webinar assembles leaders from across California, including the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission, Regional SAN in Sacramento, and our sister agency to the south, Orange County Sanitation District. We're going to discuss ways to meet challenges and prepare for new situations as they emerge. Our motivation for today's webinar is to provide critical functions with essential staff whose roles do not support telework. Team leaders must plan for continuity in the face of potential staff shortages and other management challenges. So before we continue much further, I just wanted to say that me personally, I can't be more appreciative and thankful to all of you and your ability to keep doing your jobs under the difficult circumstances we've faced. Whether you're conducting research that could help with the pandemic, serving as boots on the ground operators and engineers that are adapting to constant changes, or our highly skilled technicians who are innovating to keep all of us working. You're each of you on the front lines providing essential services, so thank you. So here at the sanitation districts, this issue is important to us because on our wastewater side, we serve 5.6 million people in Los Angeles County, and then during this pandemic, we're also operating a solid waste management system that provides for the needs of about 1/4 of our county. Here on this slide, you also see some happier times, some of our volunteers who help us to fulfill our mission. Many of our docents are in more critical categories, and so every place that we can, what we're doing is we're going virtual in order to both inform, so continue that communication, and then protect as well. That said, you'll notice on this slide that there is a pin at our Tulare Lake compost facility, and subsequent to that, there should be a pin at our Joint Administration Office where I'm broadcasting from, and those show 2 of the 10 locations where we have had an employee test positive. Now, what we're doing is we're complying with the protective measures, and I think a lot of us on this call today are doing a lot of the same things. We're physical distancing, we're also wearing face coverings, we're frequently washing our hands, and then our employees are completing a health assessment before entering their work sites. So these adaptive strategies have, of course, been protective, but as most agencies, we have been affected. Our first case occurred on March the 27th. Since then, we've had 23 employees test positive at 10 work sites for our water reclamation plants, and those are shown with the blue pins on this figure. And then these are the final locations where we've had an employee test positive shown here. And so we now, currently our numbers are low. We have 4 staff members that are out due to testing positive for the virus. None are hospitalized, and there are 5 people quarantined for having close contact with a coworker. Still, our facilities are operating at a high level and in full compliance, and that's largely due to our frontline maintenance and operations staff. So this issue is important, and what we need to do and what we're encouraging in today's webinar is to stay vigilant about being safe, because of course our most valuable resource is our people. Our goal is to make sure that our employees are in the most safe conditions possible in order to do their job. Today's webinar is going to review strategies to help support our mission, which is to protect the public health and the environment. And most importantly, we're all working together to stay safe. So I believe we have our standard CWEA disclosure next. And then let's continue our discussion by bringing up our moderator, Greg Kester. Greg is the Director of Renewable Resource Programs for CASA and the California Coordinator for Information about the Coronavirus and Wastewater. Greg is CASA's subject matter expert on emerging issues at the local, state, and federal level. Greg?
Thanks so much, Wendy, and welcome everyone to our fourth webinar addressing the potential and real impacts of COVID-19 to the wastewater sector. We remain in an unprecedented and unique circumstance and hope you're all safe and faring as best as possible during these times. We continue to want to ensure safety for our workforce, especially those in collections and others who may be exposed to COVID-19 in wastewater prior to treatment. As shelter-in-place policies have relaxed and are now returning across California and the nation, the challenge to continually provide essential wastewater treatment services increases. We've assembled well-informed experts for today's panel to discuss how best to address operational and management challenges while keeping our workforce and the public safe. We can't overstate our appreciation for them and taking time and addressing us today. And with that, just a couple of housekeeping items. In your Zoom controls, the chat function, if you could just use it for comments that may come up from the poll questions, if you have a written response you want to make, or if you have any technical issues for CWEA staff. Next one. The Q&A function is really where we'd like you to post your questions for the panelists. And panelists will try to answer these as we go through the session, but I will also take from these questions for the Q&A session at the end. And we're not going to use the raise hand function today. Fortunately, there are too many of you who are participating in the webinar, so it really isn't a very practical function. With that, we'll just begin with our first poll question. If you can just provide an answer to this. The question is, what operations have you modified due to COVID-19? And you can answer all that may apply. Flushing sewer lines, pressure washing submersible pumps, closed circuit TV monitoring, lab testing, compliance reporting, or other. And the other you can write in the chat box. So we'll give you a moment to fill this out. And responses, it appears many have not had to modify operations. Others are unsure. Fair amount have modified the flushing of the sewer lines. And lab testing, I imagine because of social distancing, is also affected. Okay, well with that, we can begin our session. I'd like to first introduce folks from San Francisco Public Utilities Commission, the wastewater enterprise, beginning with Carrie Ving. Carrie is a business strategy and performance manager for SFPUC, and she oversees strategic planning, resource recovery, workforce development, financial and capital planning, and organizational development initiatives. Following Carrie, we'll have three speakers from SFPUC. Chris McDaniels, who is the collection system manager. And he provides, spent his entire 40 years of construction working on San Francisco projects. He's provided project management, construction management, superintendent services. He's been an assistant to Department of Public Works Director Services, and he is currently the acting collection systems manager. Following Chris, we'll have Joel Prather, who is the maintenance manager of the treatment facilities. And he's worked with the San Francisco PUC for over 9 years been in civil service for over 24 years. And following him, we'll have George Engel, who is the operations manager for the wastewater enterprise at SFPUC. And he has over 15 years of wastewater experience. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Carrie.
Great. Good morning. Thank you very much, Greg. As Greg mentioned, today we're going to talk about how best to maintain our operators and our operations and sewer system and treatment plants, and continue our multi-billion-dollar capital improvements while grappling with evolving CDC and DPH guidelines and how best to keep our crews distanced and safe. We have three challenges that my colleagues are going to go through, particularly focusing on how we've been working with staggering our crews and managing hundreds of contractors on our construction sites. So with that, I'll turn it over to Chris McDaniels, the Director of Sewer Operations.
Chris, you may be on mute.
Good morning, everyone. This is Christopher McDaniels. I wanted to talk about some of the challenges that we have experienced at San Francisco PUC. One of the main challenges that we experienced was trying to protect our staff at our facilities. Currently, we have a plan in place where 1/3 of the field staff is working and 2/3 of the field staff are working at home. It has been a challenge because what do you do with your folks that are working at home? Well, we provided study material for them. We also reached out to Sacramento State to get study material. This has kept the staff busy while we have only 1/3 of our staff working at the facility.
Chris, I think you may be muted again.
Our next challenge was our vehicle use. As you know, most vehicles are able to carry 2 people, but chaser vehicle that could be a pickup or a personal vehicle. At the same time, we're also looking into plexiglass dividers. This will provide the same protection as a taxi cab driver. There's a panel between the front and back. Another challenge we had was the time it takes to make sure our staff is safe through health screening. When we first started, we had folks taking a pre-screening test at home via their telephone. When staff arrives to the site, they have to make sure that they have their face covering on. And then once they do that, then we have a mandatory facility screening at the facility. This is where their temperatures are taken, their DSW number is recorded, and an email is sent saying that they're safe to enter the facility. Along with that, we had to reroute our layout for our offices. When staff comes into the facility, we had to lay out tape on the floors and on the walls to direct them to make sure social distances is complied with. With that, I want to turn it over to Joel Prather. Thank you.
Okay. Hi, folks. My name is Joel Prather. I am the maintenance manager for San Francisco PUC, and my group is in charge of all the maintenance for the pump stations and all the treatment facilities within San Francisco. The first challenge that we face, which I'm sure a lot of you out there are facing at the same time, is the fact that the large majority of our staff need to be on site to get our work done. Early on, we tried a similar approach to what Chris was doing with the alternating crews. We had an A team and a B team, and they were working staggered shifts over a staggered 5-day shift over a 7-day period, with the overlapping days in the middle of the week. One crew would work telecommuting for a couple days a week. There were a couple of major problems with this. The first one being the disruption of our staff's normal schedules. So this presented a hardship for a few of them out there. And then language in some of our MOUs was exactly open to the employees working on weekends. Another problem was, as Chris kind of alluded to, there's only so much work that these folks can do via telecommuting. The majority of my staff, we had them catching up on various FEMA trainings and then other trainings specifically related to their crafts. We have a program we use called TPC that has a lot of great online resources, but there's only so many of those that we can do every day. The schedule shift lasted about 4 to 6 weeks until we were able to take a couple measures to help ensure the safety of the staff while reporting on site. And the first thing we did was clear out some old storage areas at some of our facilities. This allowed for some increased social distancing during safety meetings and lunch breaks. In a couple of cases, we actually have staff now reporting, small groups of staff now reporting directly to some remote pump stations, which already had a small workstation set up where they can check in. So this not only accomplishes the social distancing, but if we do get a positive COVID-19 case on one of those crews or the other crew, the amount of crew members that need to be self-isolated due to the potential exposure is limited. Then we have our virtual meetings, which have taken on an entirely new level as of lately, both for our staff that are telecommuting, but those that are still reporting on site. In the past, where we would hold a virtual meeting just to include folks from downtown or staff that couldn't make it, our new reality is that we may be in the same building, just in separate offices on the same meeting. And it's all in the interest of just maximizing the social distancing. We've also found, though, that these virtual meetings and checking in with telecommuters via virtual meetings regularly is really important in keeping them feeling engaged and supported in what's going on and updated on the information that's getting distributed. Next, like Chris mentioned, we implemented a mandatory face screening. So all face screen, every personnel on site needs to have a face screening at all time, face mask at all time. And we went a little above and beyond other state departments, where other state departments were giving the directive that the face mask could be removed but easily accessible within, if you were outside of 30 feet of someone. We went beyond that and just said basically everyone on our site, regardless of the distance, needs to have a face mask on at all times. The only exceptions to that are when you're alone in your office, alone in your assigned vehicle, or while eating. And I am happy to say that at this point, we're able to supply every employee on site with at least 5 washable masks. We have varying styles and ranging from your normal air loop masks or elastic banded masks, and then we also have neck gaiters in various sizes. Another challenge we faced early was keeping track of the barrage of information that we've been getting and communicating that to all of our employees, many of whom do not have daily access to email. So at first we kind of posted these notices on doors and bulletin boards and wherever else we could, but it soon became kind of a clustered mess. So what we did was we created these COVID-19 information boards, and you see one there on the left hand of the slide. It's basically just a 4x4 sheet of plywood on a stand, but having these strategically placed throughout the plant just gave us an easy way to keep information updated. We can replace the old information with the new stuff, and this way all of our employees know where to go to get the latest on the directives for face coverings or temperature screenings or whatever else we're doing. And so finally, we've mandated on-site health screenings at our facilities, just like collections did, and we temperature check all staff coming on site, and we ask if they have any symptoms. We also worked with our IT group to develop an online tool for supervisors. And this actually just went live in the last couple of weeks, and this has been indispensable for our crews. So our supervisors, you see it on the kind of top left of the screen there, they can log on to one of our SharePoint sites, and they can instantly see any of their staff on site and who's passed the on-site screening. They show up green. If they're gray, they are either not on site or haven't done their screening and need to do their screening. If they come up red, they haven't passed their screening, and they had a high temperature check or they had symptoms. And I guess my only last comment is my avatar is there on the top right of the screen, Build a Cat, and at this point now I'm only feeling that way in about a third of the days, so it's getting a little better, a little less chaos. With that, I'll kick it over to our operations manager, George Engel.
Thanks, Joel. Now, it's been pretty much business as usual for operations. We did go through a schedule change, but that schedule change was already planned. And so we implemented that 2 months in on May 2nd, and it's gone actually very well during the emergency. And it was a reallocation of labor, mostly onto the day shift, so we can get better supervision over all of our staff. We have seen a reduction in flows in general at all of our facilities, but most importantly, the solids concentration has gone down. So our biosolids load has been cut in about a half. We have had no COVID-19 cases for the first 4 months until the holidays occurred, and suddenly we've had 3 cases in the month of July, 1 in operation and 2 in our warehouse. Our policy here is that all people and any close contacts are sent on a mandatory 14-day quarantine, regardless of the results of your testing. So we encourage everyone to get tested every 2 weeks. And the reality is most people that have been positive did not have any signs showing when they tested positive. So reassuring all of our staff to go forward and get tested is key for us. The initial portion, we ran out of personal protective equipment. And so what we found is that we are really well prepared because all of our operators were already certified and fit tested to wear respirators. So in areas where there were aerosols or exposure to raw wastewater, we required the use of full face respirators, and we kept anyone that wasn't certified out of those areas. Once that implemented, we ran out of respirator wipes. So using sodium hypochlorite that we had on our facilities for disinfection, we made solutions based upon CDC guidance to disinfect our equipment and our respiratory protection. We ran out of hand sanitizer. So our labs made alcohol-based sanitizers, and we really restricted. We tried to go to contactless operations. So reducing the number of samples we took, process control went out the window. We only do regulatory compliance sampling. This is a video showing our construction site, a drone video. We have billions of dollars of construction on site, so it's not just protecting our staff, protecting our other contractors on site. Every single contractor has their own health and safety plan that has to be approved by us. So each one implements a slightly different protocol to protect their workers and to protect them from us. One of the things we did as well is keep contractors out of city-owned buildings. So we don't have our groups intermixing. And that caused a little tensions at the beginning, but it's worked out very well. There's been a couple COVID-19 cases on the construction crew, and those also have been isolated very quickly and moved on. We also provided 80 hours of additional COVID-19 sick pay to employees. So if you do get sick, you have time on the books. We've actually we can lend you 80 hours of time. So if you run out of that time, we can loan you another 80 hours. And for the people that show up as a little reward, essential workers can earn up to 2 weeks of additional vacation, which is another nice touch for the people that do have to show up every day. And beyond, go back. One of the best methods I've seen of a contractor handle this is going completely contactless. When you show up to work, you step out of your car and wash your hands at motion or foot activated washing stations. Then you go to an automated screening system that uses facial recognition to check you into the site, takes your temperature and records that. Once you've recorded your temperature, you get a colored wristband. That wristband then allows you onto the construction site. So, and again, those contractors have very little interface with our city employees, so we keep discreet and we keep safe. That 14-day quarantine is, again, regardless of your testing status, if someone tests negative, they still are remaining at home for 14 days. And so we are not letting anyone back. And that does cause a problem with our smaller facilities where we have smaller staff, such as our Treasure Island facility, which is run by one operator. So when you miss one operator, it's a big deal. At the big plants, it's not so much a problem. We are into our 49th employee digest of updates on COVID-19. So we continue to send out, basically focus on safety and communications through every step of this process so people are well aware of the process. And I'll turn it over to Carrie.
Thanks, George. So you can see we put a lot of thought and deliberation into how to respond to these challenges. We know every other utility is grappling with the same ones. We're more than happy to continue the conversation, and I'll turn it back over to Greg.
Thank you, Carrie, and thank you, Chris, Joel, and George. Great presentations. Here we have a second poll question. If you want to display that, Alec. The question is, what percentage of your workers are working from home during the pandemic? Going from 0 and then various percentages. If folks could answer the question that best fits your answer. Whenever you think it's time, Alec, Interesting. 10% have no one working from home. And another 10% have 3/4 or more. Very interesting responses. Good variation. Okay, well, thank you. And with that, I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Glenn Bielefeld, who is the Operations and Maintenance Manager and the current agency lead on the pandemic for the Sacramento Regional Wastewater Treatment Plant. Regional SAN represents the entire Sacramento region, and Glenn has worked for Regional SAN for 26 years. The last 10 as the O&M manager. And holds a master's degree in civil engineering. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Glenn.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Glenn Bielefeld, as he said. I'm not sure if I'm actually the lead for the COVID-19 response, but I'm certainly the spokesman today. I don't seem to have control of my PowerPoint. There we go. A little perspective on the COVID-19 situation in Sacramento County right now. I just took a look on Google. Looks like there's about 410,000 cases, confirmed cases in California. In Sacramento County, we have almost 8,000 confirmed cases. And here in Sacramento Regional SAN and our 2 districts, we don't have any confirmed cases. So that's our current status. There it goes. So Regional SAN, it's the wastewater treatment plant located in Elk Grove, California. We have about 400 employees, and 200 of those are essential employees, meaning they have to come on site to do their job. The other 200 are affiliated with our laboratory, our internal services department, and administrative staff. The Sacramento Area Sanitation District is our sister district, and they provide wastewater collection and conveyance treatment to the plant. And so they have another 300 employees. Again, all essential. They basically are doing field work and activities such as that. Anyway, both systems must operate, of course, 24/7, and we serve about 1 million people in the Sacramento area. We typically have about 125 million gallons a day average influent flow, but during the wet season, we can see as much as 500 million gallons a day. And as you know, this COVID-19 happened right there in the early spring, which is the storm season. In addition, we have a lot of construction going on site. We have about $2 billion worth of construction going on for a major plant expansion that's actually going to be ready and delivered this year. This is just a picture of our plant to kind of give a sense of how large it is. This is an 800-acre facility. It's located on a 3,000-acre site, and it does serve the entire Sacramento region for about 20 to 30 miles in all directions. There we go. So the immediate response when COVID-19 kicked into gear in early spring, as you guys know, springtime can be a little bit of a roll of the dice in the Sacramento area. And so sometimes we get some awfully big storms, and we have a combined sewer system with Sacramento. So we can again see those flows that go as high as 500 million gallons a day. So we need to be able to be here to receive that. Initially, we had different responses to the shelter-in-place orders that were coming out. Our sister agency, SASD, their M&O group, is mostly a mobile workforce, and they needed to continue to work. So they had all staff on site, and they immediately implemented social distancing and face mask issuance to their staff so they could continue. At Regional San, we're more of a campus like the picture was showing there, and our O&M teams, we immediately divided them to A and B teams. And one team we would have report to work for 1 week, and the other team would stay at home at that same week, and then they would switch every week. And that worked out only because we were at the bottom of our maintenance season there as COVID-19 began. And we were actually having a pretty light winter. So the operations staff wasn't being called out very often for storm response. All the office staff, they effectively began teleworking almost immediately as the COVID-19 order came out. We had a pandemic plan in place when this all began, and that pandemic plan was in response to, I think you guys recall, like the bird and the swine flu that happened a few years ago, but when we dusted it off, it needed an update almost immediately as this was starting out. Also, initially, the notices and the mandates, they were just coming in gushes. I mean, obviously, there was the notices coming online from the governor. We get all of our labor from the county of Sacramento at the sewer districts. So we were getting many notices from the county health and human resources department about what they were expecting to have done. Our county executive's office was also issuing plenty of orders. And then there was our executive district management team. And I can only give them a lot of kudos at those initial few days as we were trying to figure out where to go and how to handle all this. They did a very good job kind of rallying, having lots of meetings, interpreting the notices and trying to figure out exactly how to apply them at our districts. They also controlled an awful lot of rumor and misinformation was going all over the place. The district-wide notifications were going out through email and telemeetings, and also we had plenty of postings on the walls as well. I think one of the things they did that was most effective, at least for the supervisors and managers that were trying to get the people rallied, was having a COVID-19 website. They started that almost immediately, and that was very helpful, putting out those notices in a place where everybody could have access right away. They also provided quite a few responses to technical questions about the availability of PPE, or if the inventories were low, how long it would be before we could see them arriving with new material and disinfectants and wipes and such like that. There was a lot of questions, and they were giving a lot of instruction about how to manage your timesheets because I think San Francisco mentioned there was some special charge codes that were being allocated. And also there were special situations that we were trying to deal with childcare and trying to give people instruction on that, and they did a very good job with that. And then finally, there was the whole question, well, what if we do start getting sick? Again, we have 0 COVID-19 cases right now, but they said, what shall we do when somebody actually gets sick? And they were very careful to kind of look at the HIPAA laws and decide how much notification we could tell people. Then there were all the questions from staff, just questions immediately. Obviously, most staff were significantly concerned in the first few weeks of the COVID-19 thing. And most of the initial responses were strictly in response to the governor's orders to maintain a social distance and isolate or stay at home. So that's what we were trying to do. So for the staff that had to stay at the work site, we immediately began issuing any of the face masks that we had, and then doing the social distancing signs everywhere. We also gave instruction about how to use their uniforms. At our facility, our employees are allowed to take their uniforms home, that is clean uniforms. And so they could put their uniforms on, bring them to work. That way we could avoid any kind of contamination from outside sources. Also, vehicle use was a bit of an issue. We had to quickly kind of move vehicles out of pools and kind of make sure that there was single occupancy for each of the vehicles or carts if we needed to. So we did a lot of reassignment of those types of things. We emphasized everybody's personal responsibility to make sure that they complied with the guidelines that were being issued, not only by the CDC, but ourselves here at this district. We also kind of gave a lot of instruction about which leave balances. Of course, it was probably the timesheet week, the very first week this all happened. So we said, well, here's the leaves that you can use immediately on your timesheet for any of the people that were heading out for telework. I think initially the teleworking was a bit of a trouble spot for us because we had policies in place for actually allowing people to do that. And we quickly had to abandon that and say, simply go home. And initially we weren't set up for it. We had, I think, 500 VPN accounts. So I was very impressed. IT very quickly raised that to 20,000 VPN accounts in response to this. There's a couple of pictures of our staff and the way they were starting to comply with the face masks and all the signage that was posted around the site. So special issues. As I had mentioned, the county allocated special leave balances for employees who met various criteria, but the questions quickly came up about, well, how do you use those? Because the criteria were a little bit open-ended. But the leave balances paid administrative leave for some folks when they didn't have an ability to do telework from home. Also, for example, a lot of our craft people, you know, they actually have to be at the work site to do their job. But a lot of the clerical staff, or clerical staff and others, they simply didn't have the computers at home to do any kind of teleworking. Underlying health conditions was a big discussion initially about how to handle all that with the doctor's notes and everything. So emergency sick leave that was also available for staff, and that was available not only for illness, but also for childcare. And so much more instruction had to be issued for that as well. PPE inventory was a big issue initially with the disinfecting wipes and the gels and the sprays. We were a little short-handed on the disinfecting wipes and such, so we also worked with the contractor to provide a distilled disinfection product, kind of in a liquid form. And then face masks, surprisingly, we had quite a few of those from the previous swine flu, and we began issuing those out, but we had a limited inventory of the lighter weight face masks. Currently, we do have many face masks. We've caught up on the supply for all that. So we've issued at least 3 face masks to most employees. We also established a roving janitor to go around and make sure all the public areas and high touch zones are cleaned up on a regular basis. And we're not quite ready to implement this yet, but in a couple of weeks, we're going to be implementing checking everybody's temperature at entry portals to the facility, just to make sure that they're not bringing anything in. So what's the current status? Well, we've actually been able to complete all of our critical work at this time. The O&M staff that have been on site, they were able to keep up with all the critical work as winter was ending. And as we began to go into the regular maintenance season, Regional San, we returned both teams on site. So they have a staggered start schedule, and they avoid, it's effectively 2 teams, still an A and a B team. They avoid each other at their morning meetings. If they have to share break rooms, they maintain social distancing. They share different, well, they have different lunch periods. They don't share the locker rooms. So that's kind of a way we've been maintaining our social distancing. We also have put even more signage all around the facility. We put up plastic shields at any areas where people will be interfacing with each other. And then, like I said, the reusable face masks have been issued to all staff that are on site, and it's required that everybody must wear them indoors and any place where they're working where they cannot maintain a social distance. Notably too, all of our chemical deliveries and parts have been arriving on time, so we have not been having an issue with that. Like I mentioned, we don't have any COVID-19 cases right here, but there are a growing number of cases in Sacramento County. I wouldn't be surprised if we start to see them. So we're preparing ourselves to have some of our staff return to work, and that's why we're having the installation of these temperature measurements at entry portals, so that we can respond like some of you have at sending people home if they're showing symptoms. Notably too, our construction work has continued and even accelerated in some cases with the lack of traffic on the roads. Some of it's actually going faster than expected. All of our contractors also have a health and safety plan, and they've been implementing very similar processes and procedures to kind of manage COVID-19 like we have. And we still do allow some of our contractors with the district to come on site. Of course, then they have to abide by our rules for wearing face masks and such. And then there's telemeetings. I think that's the new norm for us. Even people that are on site nowadays, like myself, we are tele-meeting right here in the office building to maintain our social distance. And that's really common. As more staff start to come back, maybe in a month or so, I suspect that will continue. One of the things we're trying to deal with right now before we bring staff on site is considering our HVAC systems and what we can do to maybe filter out any of the virus that might be in the air ducts going between buildings and office spaces and such. And then we're trying to also figure out other ways that we can do, I guess, distance learning for our own staff. We have a regular regimen of training, and some of it can be done at a distance, and other you actually have to bring people together to do that training. So a little bit on the cultural effects. It's been kind of interesting because the essential workers that come on site every day, I think there's been a little bit of a perception that telework isn't really work. And of course it is. The people that are out there teleworking, they're working very hard. All of our regular reports, laboratory measurements, and everything affiliated with sending out notifications and such are still happening, but it is getting to be quite a challenge to maintain cohesive teams. We just simply aren't seeing each other very often anymore. So even with video capability, I'd say probably only 10% of the people that log into a telemeeting might actually show their image. So you start to lose contact with folks. Also, it looks like at this point, most of our employees are willingly adopting the use of face masks and PPE and the best practices for hygiene in general. I'm very pleased to say that. It turned the corner very quickly. I'd say 98% of the staff, maybe 99% are just very willingly participating in all this. We've very much emphasized everybody's personal responsibility, that, you know, have respect for your fellow employees. The face mask protects them, not just you. So people have really got on board with that. And I appreciate it very much. As I said, all of our employees have adapted to working in this new normal situation to keep the sewer system running. And I think we're doing a pretty good job at that. In the long term, I think we're going to be, we just brought in a large group of operators. We hired them several months ago, but we kind of had it on hold until we could bring them in. They just started this week, and we're going to be trying that out, going through the training and probation process for them. Also, training in large groups. I mentioned we have large construction on site. We do have to have the typical types of trainings that you would have as these construction projects deliver. So that's going to be a special challenge to find locations where we can get large groups of people together, do those trainings, and actually have the feedback that they would need in those types of sessions. And then there's simple things like doing change management with our documentation. That's an on-site activity. We need to continue to bring people in to do those types of things and confirm that drawings and other things that are getting done on a normal basis are actually being recorded in our data systems. So that's where we're at today. And I, again, want to thank all of our staff for having very willingly started to adapt to this new normal.
Thank you very much, Glenn. And Alec, the last poll question, I think, if we can display that. The question is, how are you checking or screening employees for health issues before they report for work? And if you can check all that apply here. Okay, and our response is, interestingly, almost a quarter are not screening. Almost half do employee self-reporting, which is good. Almost 40% employees get temperature screened and asked whether or not they have symptoms upon arrival. And then lesser responses for the other options. Okay, well, thank you. And go on to our last panelist, Rob Thompson, who's the Assistant General Manager and Director of Operations and Maintenance for the Orange County Sanitation District. As the Assistant General Manager, Rob oversees the Operations and Maintenance and Engineering departments. And previously he served as the Director of Engineering. With that, I'm glad to welcome Rob.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to speak and let you know what we're doing here at Orange County Sanitation District. Like you've heard from all the other agencies so far, OCSD took the COVID-19 pandemic very, very seriously from the start. We mobilized our EOC, our Emergency Operations Center. It is still mobilized. We meet 2 times a week at this point. Every manager in the agency comes together and we go through our response, make sure we have a common understanding of the situation. We're all speaking in a unified voice and making sure every facet of the organization hears the same thing and understands what everyone else is dealing with. In addition, the executive management team meets every day, every work day, I should say, Monday through Thursday, where we're all together and we meet at 3 o'clock and do the same thing. So there is no misunderstanding. There is no assumption. Everybody has the same objective. Every meeting we have, we start with the 3 objectives, which you see here on the slide. The safety of our employees and the public, number one, first and foremost. We can't do our work without those people manning the systems that we have. We are committed to maintaining regulatory compliance. There's no slippage. We have to treat the wastewater because that's also a public health and recycling obligation that we have. And then making sure we comply with every mandate from the federal, state, county, and professional guidelines. And there are a myriad. And it takes daily meetings just to keep up with the flow. It's slowed down a little. It's starting to pick back up. I'll talk a little bit more about that. We are clear about our priorities. Number one, 24/7, 365, we will run this operation. Number two is we're going to keep up with our critical maintenance because we were clear from day one. This is not a sprint. We are in a marathon. This isn't going to end anytime soon. Anybody who thought it was going to be over at the end of May, I think was kidding themselves and quickly came to a different understanding. It is still a marathon. You cannot wear out staff. You cannot sacrifice today's performance and today's concerns for the long term. And with that in mind, the planned maintenance has to be done, not just corrective, but planned maintenance. If we get to the point where we've burned up all of our equipment and things aren't ready to run, then we failed in our basic objective. Capital improvements, the same idea. That's a lot of critical maintenance. That's replacing worn out and corroded parts and pieces. Long term, we can't survive as an agency if we just take a year off and don't do any replacement or maintenance. So with that being said, we did not start flat-footed. Orange County Sanitation District worked hard. A few years ago, every division had to redo its continuity of operation plan, or COOP as we like to call it. Part of that continuity of operation plan was a pandemic response. So it didn't catch us by surprise. Every division manager in the agency and every executive manager had just finished creating this plan. And so it wasn't a huge step forward. We had a pretty good supply of personal protective equipment ready to go, a lot of N95 masks in our warehouse. It helped to kind of mute some of the initial concern where people were very, very concerned about aerosolization and those sorts of things. In addition, our professional staff had been moving toward a more mobile platform. People haven't been given a desktop computer in quite some time. Over the past 3-4 years, everyone's been moving to laptops and tablets. So it really helped us when we hit the ground and sending people home to telecommute. They already had a lot of the infrastructure in place to just go home. They could go home and be as effective professionally as they were at their desk in a lot of cases. In addition, and this is more for this audience, OCSD started to cross-train its maintenance techs, that is, move them between plants to create greater familiarity. And we started an operator training program. We diligently looked at, about 9 months ago, starting a training program, and we dedicated a supervisor, an operations supervisor, a lead operator, and a senior operator at each plant. That was the plan going forward. And their job was to create better emergency operating procedures, better standard operating procedures, overall process training programs so that we could train people with better tools. So when they were brought into the organization or promoted, we could train them and then qualification test them to make sure that they were ready to go to work here at OCSD. And since we have 2 treatment plants, it brought a lot of standardization in how the things were done between the 2 plants. So in the event we lost an entire crew, for instance, to COVID infection or isolation, it would give us more opportunity to move people around. Those resources became much more valuable to us because they're much more able to move. So we didn't start at zero, and no one started with any knowledge on COVID-19. So we had to rely, like everyone else, on the outside experts. And we did not make a move based on how it felt or how it looked. We stopped, studied the science, took the best input we could from all the sources that everyone's already named. They're here on the slide. I won't take too much of my time on that. But the other thing I want to say is we also didn't react too quickly, because one of the problems you can have if you start to yo-yo your staff around, if the staff don't think there's clear direction or clear understanding, it can cause chaos. So we tried to be very scientific. We tend to be engineers and scientists in the EMT, and we thought very carefully, and while being decisive, we didn't act too quickly. So some of the things that we didn't do, we started to have discussions with our union about the A-B shift. They pushed back again for a lot of the reasons that I heard from other agencies, weekends, bargaining agreements. So we went quickly away from that. We never actually implemented any A-B shifts. Everyone stayed that's hands-on in the treatment plant. That's key. What we did was find ways to make more space for them, to create more space in workspaces, more space in locker rooms, common areas, those sorts of things. And I'll talk a little bit more about that on the next slide. 2 slides ahead, sorry. Again, I already talked about the EOC. This is the old EOC, where everyone could actually be in the same room and have conversations and react to good old-fashioned things like floods and earthquakes. In the EOC of COVID, it's all for us Microsoft Teams, which nobody had really heard of Teams before January, but now everyone's a Teams expert. This is, again, meeting twice a week. We make sure we're on the same page, and this passes information to the executive management team. It's a good way for us to all stay on the same page. The big 4. We quickly came to the idea that the things we can control as OCSD are right here. We can control social distancing on our sites. We have the ability to give job direction for people to stay 6 feet apart. We have the ability to make space for people. So the question has come up many times, how many people are telecommuting? About half of our overall OCSD staff are telecommuting, and about half are hands-on workers that are here in the plants every day. So we made the decision early on to get all of our telecommutable office staff out of the plant. And the idea wasn't just to keep them safe and isolated, it's actually to protect the plant staff, because every chance for an interaction is a chance for an infection. So by taking people out of the interaction equation, when you're at work here at OCSD, there's more space. So instead of having collections crews go to the locker room and go to their workspace and be shoulder to shoulder like they would have been in January, suddenly those guys start to meet in an engineering conference room, as you can see down in the corner of the slide. These are actually collection staff. They're coming in, they're doing their paperwork. They're using the showers that would have been used by construction staff, and it frees up more space, more locker room, more shop area for other people to use. So having people telecommute is good for the telecommuters in that they're not coming in, not being exposed at work, but it's also about making room for those that have to be here. And I want to take a quick second to talk about that a little bit. One of the big problems we had early on was there was this nomenclature that said, if I am a hands-on worker, if I'm an operator, if I'm a mechanic, if I'm an instrument tech, if I'm an electrician, then I'm essential. I do essential work, and those engineers are non-essential. So we had to kind of fight that bias, that cultural look at things and say, no, OCSD's service is essential. We all are doing that service. And if you remember the first slide, we could point and say, these are the 4 things we're going to do. These are our 3 objectives. All of it is essential for us to be viable long-term. So there is no non-essential worker, which is an engineer maybe, and there's an essential hands-on. We did away with that. All OCSD are essential. We're all doing work, and we're all doing things differently, but supporting each other in the long-term viability of this operation. So back to the big 4, social distancing, a lot of things to make that happen. wear your masks, wear your PPE. A lot of discussion about this aerosolization. One of the discussions we had very early on also was, if you're just now concerned about aerosolization around wastewater, you probably should have been concerned about all the other stuff in that wastewater for a lot of years. So if you're massively modifying what you're doing, either maybe you weren't doing enough up front, but we should all respect the dangerousness of the facilities that we're working in and the risks that we face. And we should be taking the same precautions, I think, now and in the future if we weren't before. And then the last two are really about proper hygiene, washing your hands, and disinfection. Hand washing, can't say enough about it. You should do it all the time anyway. But we also hired a special janitorial crew. They actually wear blue vests, so they're easily identified. One was just in my office this morning. Twice a shift, they walk through the entire area. The lady had a backpack on with a little hose coming out the side that looked like a garden blower, but it was really someone spraying a bleach water mix made by our laboratory. And they disinfect all common areas and surfaces throughout not only the admin areas, but also out in the office areas in the plant. That's another idea we had. There's a lot of areas in the plant where there are remote stations. So when people come in, we don't do that old pass down where everybody looks at each other and has a 15-minute where are we going, what are we doing meeting. Everyone comes in, goes to the locker room, gets ready for work, put on their uniform, and then go to their workstations. And they're separate. And they have a team meeting and do the pass down in that same way. Space is everything. We don't have in-person meetings. Everything's Teams. Even if you're in the same office building, you just have a Teams meeting. It is what it is. And that's the way it's going to be probably through next March, through next cold and flu season. Kind of hit this already, but a lot of questions about how are you protecting yourself with symptom identification. It is important, but I'll tell you, it's a porous system. If you're counting on keeping COVID out by doing the check, go back to the big four. Even if someone is infected, if you can get them to keep their distance, wear their mask and disinfect and have good hygiene, you're probably going to be okay. Yes, we do these steps. Everyone fills out the questionnaire that you see there with the steps. I, in fact, am in the office today, and I sent a text to my boss, the general manager, saying, I am COVID symptom-free. I took my temperature before I came in. Only I can certify as an employee if I've had any of the other things, persistent cough, chills, shortness of breath, aches, pains. Those are the things where you really have to count on your employees to do the right thing to protect those they work with. If they want to come in and work and they pop to acetaminophen or a couple of Advil, they probably won't have a fever. So you really have to use your influence to let them know that it's not just you're protecting the agency's mission. And to the extent you can get buy-in on that, it's good. The sanitation district has had, I think, 6 positive cases. Only one had any possibility, we think, of being someone inside. All 5 of the 6 are already back to work. The one person that is out right now is a teleworker. Never was here, got infected and is going through, actually is still doing work remotely through the illness. That's their choice. They're able to do it. So we are getting along, but in the end, all you have is distance and hygiene. And if people do those things, wear their masks, it's all going to be a much better outcome for us. Communicate, communicate, communicate. We're doing everything we can. We have at least weekly updates to the employees. We have weekly updates to our board of directors at a minimum. Every time there is a positive case, we let the staff know in the spirit of transparency that nobody's trying to hide anything. HIPAA laws make things a little obscure, but anytime there's any kind of positive case, we go through the notifications. We speak to the employee, who were you in contact with, we assume you were wearing a mask, tell us positively you were wearing a mask, they weren't within 6 feet. We go through all of that and let the person know. If they have a risk of being infected, meaning no mask and close for 15 minutes, then they go out and they get tested. If not, they get tested if they were at work, but they can stay at work as long as they're doing the big four. It's a way that we're gonna help survive in the cold and flu season. That to me is one of the big questions going forward. If we get too aggressive and we send people home in an entire shift, next cold and flu season when everyone's got the sniffles or the other flu is going around or whatever, if we're sending everybody home for a runny nose, I don't know how I'm gonna operate my treatment plant. So we have to be very careful about saying something is dangerous now in the summer, but when things get desperate in the winter, it's okay. We're trying to be very consistent in our messaging. We think COVID-19 is a serious threat and it is manageable if we do the right things. And that is our job and that is our expectation of every one of our employees. Keep your distance, wash your hands, wear a mask, and we commit to disinfecting everything that we can as we go along. Moving along, external communication, things like this opportunity to speak. I just did a virtual tour yesterday for the first time. It's a new experience. We love our tours here. We have a great tour bus. I went to steal some props from the tour bus and the battery's dead. So it tells you it's a different world we're living in where we're trying to outreach in new and different ways. COVID's changed about everything we do. So please connect with us on social media. I get in trouble if I don't say that. And we can answer any questions you might have as now there's question and answer time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rob. Great presentation. Thanks to all of our panelists. I think it was a very excellent and informative session. And with that, we'll get into some of the questions and answers. One that came in several times and maybe is best directed to George is what accounted for, or what do you expect accounted for the reduction in biosolids that you have experienced?
Right, so with no action in the downtown core, we have no commercial dense concentrated waste coming out of those buildings. So we still have the residential, about 850,000 population in the city, but we don't have that additional million people coming in for work. So that's really what we expect is the difference.
And how about flows? Have they also decreased?
Flows have decreased only a couple MGD at our facilities, at our large facilities. So our Southeast plant, we saw about a 3 MGD reduction, so not much. And we conserve water already, so it's pretty typical for what we see normally.
Excellent, thank you. And I guess a question for each of the agencies is, are there any additional cautions needed in your estimation beyond the face masks and social distancing? I guess this is really something where CDC is given the opinion that wastewater treatment workers really don't need anything beyond their usual PPEs. But do any of you have any additional thoughts on that?
I will tell you from Orange County Sanitation District standpoint, I'll restate what I said. If there's a lot of nasty things that could be living in wastewater that could be aerosolized, and we should be protecting our workers to the greatest extent possible anyway. So to me, COVID isn't the greatest risk you're going to face in wastewater. So from the aerosolization, I think that's, in my estimation, a bit more overblown as a concern. It shouldn't be a new concern, is maybe a better way of saying it.
Yeah. I think that's an excellent point, Rob. I would just also complement that with the fact that COVID being an enveloped virus is much more easily destroyed in the system rather than some of the other viruses that we know we're exposed to. And I guess another question is whether either, and I'll maybe address this first to Carrie and then to Rob. Have you found many workers who have actually contracted COVID? And a question, I guess, follow-up is there much testing of employees done as one of the screening mechanisms? I know Glenn had mentioned no cases, but Carrie, have you seen any?
We have, and George did touch on this, or I believe Joel might have. We've had a few cases just since the July 4th holiday. San Francisco does offer free tests to all essential city employees, and they get tested every couple of weeks, and it's pretty quick testing, pretty quick turnaround. I haven't personally undergone it, but I know Joel and George have, if they want to say a little bit more.
Yeah, thank you. And Rob, have you seen any cases in Orange County?
Yes, we have. And we have a very specific protocol that we walk through. It was something that was discussed at length amongst our executive management team to make sure that we really thought through how this was going to go down. So it was a question of when somebody came positive. So I think the number is 6 at this point. Of the 6 people we had that tested positive, only one was identified because they had contact with somebody here at the treatment plant. And even then, we'll never know if they got COVID because they were exposed to the person potentially here at the plant. But what happens is when somebody tests positive or becomes aware that they have it, they are obligated to call a special person in HR. That person is tracking everybody in the district. And then the questions start: who'd you come in contact with in the last so many days? Those people that were potentially exposed are notified and scheduled for testing. We're having trouble getting the tests done in a timely fashion. So we've contracted with a service that will actually come on site. They tend to be very timely. Like if we get news in the morning, we can get them here in the afternoon, or if it's in the afternoon, we'll bring them in the next day. Everyone affected gets tested. Now, then the question becomes, great, you test them, but it hadn't had a chance to incubate and become findable yet. So what do? So the standard protocol is once you've been tested, you can, and it's negative, you can stay at work. Everyone knows that there's still that potential. They keep their distance, they wear their mask, they do all those things to make sure they're being good citizens and good employees. And then 8 to 10 days later, they get tested again, just to make sure that it didn't take off in the meantime. So we have a procedure on that here at OCSD. Understood, it's on the website, everyone's aware of how it works.
Right. Well, thank you. Here's another one that's of interest that did garner a fair amount of news, and just wondering, maybe start with Glenn and then go to Carrie and Rob, but have you experienced any blockages from the increased use of wipes since the pandemic began? Glenn?
Yeah, for Regional SAN and SASD, I'm not aware of any increase in blockages because of that.
Excellent.
I don't think so. I don't think we've had anything beyond the usual amount.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Carrie or anybody?
Yes, Joel, I believe, touched on this in the Q&A. We have seen an increase in wipes and bar screens. Joel, do you want to say a little bit about that?
Yeah, no, it's traditionally something that we haven't seen in our system, fortunately, but just recently on our Treasure Island system, we saw a blockage of a pump due to wipes going down. So yeah, only recently though. That was in the last couple of weeks, I think.
Okay.
Nothing significant at OCSD.
Well, that's good. There's been some news items about it, but and I know we have some legislation to try to address some of those issues. Another question that came in that I hadn't really thought about, but is there any concern over compliance? I think, Rob, you mentioned this a little bit, but concern over compliance with the HIPAA privacy requirements.
A whole lot of concern. We pay monumental attention to not publicizing. That's why everything comes to one HR person. That HR person handles things discreetly. People that need to know there was an exposure know that they were exposed, but they don't necessarily know who it was. It can cause some angst because then people's minds start running a little bit about who did I talk to? Is it Joe or John or Emily or Sue? Or it can kind of become a little divisive amongst the crew, but obviously pretty quickly you figure out who's not there as a crew, and you can do some quick ciphering, and people understand, but you do have to be very careful about what you say and what you don't say and how you handle some of these forms. We don't do paper forms. If you fill out that COVID checklist that you saw, it's electronic and it goes to your supervisor and it's quarantined away. We specifically moved away from paper. You don't want to touch and handle an infection vector, but you also have trouble leaving that on your desk and somebody walks up and bang, you have HIPAA stuff.
Yeah, good point.
Glenn,
Glenn?
I'd like to echo Rob. We have similar processes in place as well. We've been very concerned with the HIPAA laws. We're also sort of centralizing the communication down to one HR person, one of our personnel department staff. But yeah, we pay close attention to it. We try to make sure that just generic notices go out to people. And so far it's been successful.
Good. And anyone from San Francisco on this issue?
It's a big issue. I would probably defer to Joel again, if you want to say a couple words, Joel.
Yeah, no, the same thing that Rob and Glenn have said. It is an incredibly important issue, and we do the best we can just to, when we do a positive, to make sure that doesn't spread. It's the who that has it doesn't spread. Having said that, though, as many as you know out there, there's a lot of chatting that goes on, where our employees talk and there's rumors, and the best thing we can try and do is get out in front of those rumors and give as much information as we can without being in violation of any laws. So yeah, it's a fine line to balance though, but we do the best we can.
Yes. Well, good. And then a question that came in that I think was answered online, but what kind of cartridge is used for the full face regulators, respirators?
Right, we're using the multi-gas vapor cartridge with a P100 filter on it at SFPUC.
Right. And
OCSD.
I'm sorry there.
It's a similar item for OCSD. Again,
Okay.
this isn't the one thing we're protecting against. So yeah.
Right.
And that is our standard cartridge we use for normal protection. So we did not change anything for this case.
Great. Great. And then another one that I think may have been answered online, but what is the policy on temperature when you are screening staff coming in? Is there a cutoff point at which they aren't allowed in?
100.4.
Yeah, it's the same for SFPUC. That's our threshold, 100.4.
Right.
Regional SAN has an
And we
implement.
also,
We also have a temperature about that same level. We're taking the slow approach, like Rob Thompson was indicating, trying to make sure we have all our ducks in a row before we implement.
Yep. Someone else was going to say something?
we also require you to answer a series of questions, including, have you been exposed to anyone in your household that is sick? And those all will exclude you from coming to work.
Great. And I think that has fairly exhausted our unique questions. So great job, everyone. I guess one final one was whether or not, and this has been touched on, but can employees take their own temperature and self-report?
At OCSD, that's the expectation, because we don't want you to come in and get your temperature taken. And again, that's one of the 9 symptoms. And that's, to me, that's not the most reliable way to do things. If you're not feeling well, don't come in.
Yeah.
It may be the cold, it may be the flu, it may be whatever, but if you're not feeling well, don't come in. That's how you owe that to your team members. You owe that to the people you're working 6 foot shoulder to shoulder with. Don't come in if you're not feeling well. If you're really relying on that infrared dot on your forehead, by the way, I'm only 96.7 on a general. So it's an imperfect measure. If you're not feeling well, don't come in. That's the mantra.
Good. And I just saw there was one other question as to whether or not any of you all are participating in wastewater surveillance. And I know all 3 of you are, so that's an easy answer. And with that, I would really like to thank you all very much. Wonderful job today. A lot of good information. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Wendy.
Thank you.
I'd just like to thank everyone and let you know that the presentations and also a recording of this will be available to the participants, and there will be more information coming out from CWEA related to this issue that of course affects our field. So thank you to our panelists, and that's it for me.
Thank you, guys.
I guess if there is a webinar survey will be sent and a follow-up email, if you could fill out, would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.